Please bow your heads. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this beautiful day. Thank you for the children of this great state, and thank you for everyone here, both to listen and to speak, that your kids, that our kids are the reason why we are all here. May your Holy Spirit please guide us in our thoughts, our words, and our deeds. Amen.
Before we get started today, we are going to go in order. As many of you know, the Education Committee, and we've got over 30 bills sitting in the committee. It's one of the busiest, and it takes quite a while to vet each bill. But particular, this bill, SB 88, this is the fourth public hearing that we've had. We had two last year. We had one during the off time. So we're going to move this one. We're going to go, as far as testimony, I'm going to limit it to 15 minutes. Because, like I said, we've got some very important measures we've got to vet through as well, and this one has been very well vetted. I know there's some substitutes of some changes to it. Senator, if you get started with that, but after 15 minutes, we'll open it up to a vote and see what the will of the committee is.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, if you don't mind, I'm going to like to read a little short statement to the records, and we'll go from there. We're working off LC 491526S, and this is a Senate substitute. You good with that?
Yep, that's correct.
All right. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we have worked on this bill now for roughly 3 years. We have accepted and worked for changes with multiple groups. We took their concerns to heart, and we did not say no to one group who came to us. To name some groups, we worked with Georgia Equality, from whom we added a safe space clause for kids who feel afraid to talk to their parents. So that's in there. We have worked with School Superintendents Group, from whom we changed the way we dealt with public schools completely. Public school parents now have a broad process they can leverage for transparency in the formulation of these policies around the sensitive nature of this issue. Private school parents do not have, and public schools have asked for more autonomy to use that process instead, which we gave them. We worked in earnest to make this bill fair while still achieving our goal of making sure children's parents are involved in these sensitive and often life-changing issues. This is a transparency bill, nothing more. The only change in this bill since the last time we heard it is a very minor change. Now, if the committee sub merely says that we changed from opt-out to an opt-in at private schools, making it separate from any other documents or contracts that a private school requires parents to sign. We felt that an opt-in was a more efficient way to go about ensuring that this did not slip through the cracks with busy parents who work and raise their children. There will be a set time during which they will need to get the documents into the school, which will be set by the school, Mr. Chairman. And those are the changes that has been made on this bill, and that is it, except the fact that we have worked on it for 3 years. Mr. Chairman, I would like to introduce, to start off this conversation, Jeff Cleghorn, who is an expert witness in this issue here. And if you don't mind, I'll let him take the mic. He's on number 2, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jeff Cleghorn, sixth-generation Georgian, live in Butts County, Army veteran, retired lawyer, and have been a gay rights activist for the last 3 decades. I served on the board of directors of Georgia Equality and Lambda Legal and am a past president of the Stonewall Bar Association. I have long advocated for the equal dignity of gay and lesbian Georgians and Americans. SB 88 is necessary because queer, gender identity, transgender activism, and the transgender medical industry are aggressively targeting children of all ages, including inside school classrooms. This is a belief system that many people, me included, do not believe in. The gay rights movement succeeded because we changed hearts and minds, and we did it the old-fashioned way by telling the truth about our lives. And today, gays and lesbians live in every Georgia county, happy and content to love our families and be good citizens. I have long known and worked with many transgender people, and I know that they only want to live their lives in peace, free from mistreatment by anyone. And I'm glad trans Americans and Georgians now have every legal right as the rest of us, with the Supreme Court recently expanding Title VII to include workplace protections for transgender. But as a result of piggybacking transgender activism on the gay movement of yesterday, transgender activists never did the work. They skipped right over the changing hearts and minds part. Instead, They stridently declared that, quote, LGBTQ plus is now a single identity, and that some people can be both sexes at the same time, while other people are neither male nor female, and some people are born in the wrong body, and some women have a penis, and there are 58 different genders and as many pronouns. SB 88 is necessary because the former gay rights movement has been hijacked by those pushing this dishonest gender ideology on children. This is about much more than helping kids with gender dysphoria, most of whom will grow up to be gay or lesbian if left alone, according to every study ever conducted on the subject. This is about indoctrinating kids into a belief system that is not real. Tens of millions of dollars are spent each year by groups like GLSEN and the Trevor Project, specifically targeting kids with this ideology. And queer activists push this belief system that gender and sex and sexuality can mean whatever someone says they mean, and there should be no boundaries. Parents have every right to know if this stuff shows up in their child's school. No one had ever heard of a transgender child until recently, and today we see tens of thousands of young females soliciting GoFundMe donations online to amputate their healthy breasts or to have, quote, gender-affirming hysterectomies. 15 years ago, there were only 2 or 3 so-called gender clinics. Today, there are hundreds, including more than 50 pediatric. The skyrocketing thousands of % recent increase in kids claiming a trans identity is not by accident. And children are being harmed. There are more than 52,000 members of a Reddit detransitioner group, mostly young lesbians and gay men, with gut-wrenching stories of regret, sterility, loss of sexual function, early onset osteoporosis, and vaginal atrophy, as the transgender medical industry is laughing all the way to the bank. SB 88 is needed because they are proselytizing this queer sex sexuality ideology to children. Activists in schools have no business interfering with the parent-child relationship. Do not let schools teach kids to keep secrets from their parents. These are not Georgia values. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we have some folks here also to testify. They know the time constraints. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. So we've got our first speaker, Gabe Hartwig.
Hello, I rise today in support of this bill because I believe that parents should have the right to decide what their children learn in regard to controversial topics like so-called gender identity. I also believe that parents have a right to know if individuals they trust their children with are having discussions with those children on such sensitive topics. Additionally, by providing funding and tax incentives to schools that dabble in this dangerous ideology, the state tacitly is stamping a seal of approval on the things that those schools teach. I don't think the gender concepts that have been pushed in other states represent the values of the people of Georgia. Cases around the country have shown that it's time for legislation here in Georgia, and I hope that you will consider voting for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellie Rydell.
Hello.
And then Skylar Atkins is on deck.
Okay. My name is Ellie, and I stand before you as a proud member of Gays Against Groomers, a nonprofit organization dedicated to ensuring the safety and well-being of all children. We advocate against the indoctrination, sexualization, and medicalization of children being done under the guise of LGBTQIA. I'm here in tentative support of Senate Bill 88, a bill that would increase transparency between schools and parents of attending children regarding a child's gender identity and exposure to gender ideology. SB 88 is a step in the right direction, a sliver of hope for parents who desire inclusion in their children's lives and have been feeling pushed out by the education system. This bill proposes full transparency between schools and parents when it comes to matters of gender dysphoria, changes in identity, pronouns, and appearance that may indicate an identity crisis in their child. It's a good attempt towards rebuilding the trust that has been strained between schools and parents by requiring schools to keep parents in the loop about their children's well-being. The bill not only honors parental rights, but also restores a sense of empowerment and partnership in the upbringing of our future. It's not about restricting a child's right to express their identity. It's about recognizing the importance of collaboration between schools and parents and fostering a safe and supportive environment for every child. As a member of Gays Against Groomers, we understand the value of creating spaces that encourage openness, acceptance, and understanding. SB 88 aligns with these principles by acknowledging the critical role parents play in their children's lives. This bill sends a message that our lawmakers are listening and that they recognize the concerns of parents and that they are committed to compromise in creating a more inclusive and transparent educational system. In conclusion, I urge you to support Senate Bill 88. Let us embrace this opportunity to rebuild trust, empower parents, and pave the way for a future where the safety and happiness of our children are shared priorities for all. Thank you.
Thank you. And we've got Lawrence Widener is on deck.
Good evening, afternoon, I guess. Hello, my name is Skylar Akins. I'm the policy director for the Log Cabin Republicans of Georgia. The Georgia chapter of the Log Cabin Republicans, the nation's largest and oldest organization for gay and lesbian Republicans and conservatives, is asking for your vote for Senate Bill 88, also known as the Parents and Children Protection Act. We believe this bill empowers parents by requiring schools to adopt specific policies about the discussions of gender identity, the counseling of children with gender dysphoria, and other gender ideology topics. It preserves the right of parents of privately schooled children to opt out now in and believe that if they believe the instruction is unscientific, goes against their beliefs, or is simply inappropriate, and empowers parents to take a more active role in their children's education and give them transparency over what is taught. Our organization represents thousands of patriotic gay and lesbian Georgians throughout the state of Georgia. We are the leading force against the dangerous far-left policies pushed by groups such as Georgia Equality and Human Rights Campaign, which have largely taken over by radicals. They do not represent the views of many gay and lesbians in this state. Like any sensible American, we are saddened that we would even need such legislation, but to not act is simply off the table because of the effects of drastic ideologies such as queer theory or gender identity are having on our children here in Georgia and elsewhere. We must enact common sense policy legislation like Senate Bill 88 to help curb the dangers of radical policies permeating our schools, churches, and institutions. We stand ready to work with any member of the General Assembly to pass legislation to protect children, empower parents, and preserve Georgia as the best place in America to raise a family, work, play, do business, and call home. Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and committee members, my name is Lawrence Winder. I am gay, I am a father, and I'm an educator. I tutor all over Metro Atlanta, Georgia. I tutor Gwinnett, Fulton, Forsyth, Hall, Rockdale, Newton, and Cobb County. And it's disheartening to see that there are elements of wokeism being taught, permeating all over city districts in our curriculum. Gender ideology, queer theory should have no place in kids' classrooms. If this Trojan horse of queer theory, gender ideology, is to be allowed in children's classrooms, then we should give power back to the people and allow parents, those who want to opt in to listen on this gender ideology, to do that, but for others, for parents to have the option to not have that in their classrooms. And by doing so, we restore good faith back to the schools and build back trust and confidence of parents to their schools. With that, I yield back time.
Thank you. We've got Avion Brew would be next.
Good afternoon. I'm a proud parent of 2 wonderful boys, and I'm a concerned citizen in our country with the state of our affairs, especially when it comes to education. When I was made aware of SB 88, I was dismayed that we would be even having conversations about gender-related studies with children as young as elementary school age. I don't find it appropriate to have these conversations without parental consent, and therefore it should be law that only this content would be shared with children after parents have decided to opt into this information. I too grew up in New York City, growing up, a very diverse area before making my way south of the Mason-Dixon line. And though I have heels on today and beautiful dresses, I identified as a proud tomboy for many years of my life, to be quite honest with you. And I really do think we have to go back to a more simplistic way of understanding life. It's okay for a child to be a tomboy or a tomgirl. It's okay to come out as gay and lesbian. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's not the place of our educators to be political activists in these classrooms indoctrinating our children. Get back to teaching STEM. Get back to teaching science, technological studies, engineering, and mathematics. It is not the place to go down the road of ideology. And I yield my time.
Thank you very much. I know I'm going to have several disappointed people in the audience, but like I said, this is our first or our fourth public hearing on this matter. We've had very long debate on it. So now I'll shut down the public comment portion and ask for any comments from the committee or questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So last time we had a hearing on this, it was very different than this particular hearing because it was over the summer and we heard a lot about examples of some material or discussions that folks thought were inappropriate in a lot of private schools. And a lot of them, some of them dealt with, I would say, gender ideology. Some certainly did not. And it was clear that the woman who provided most of her testimony very much objected to anything that also, at least that's how it came off to me, very much objected to anything that was accepting of gay students or sexual orientation as well. So that's kind of where it stopped because many members of the committee had some heartburn on dictating to private schools. The private schools she was discussing were all pretty much elite Atlanta area institutions charging, $30K plus for their tuition, and no one's forcing anyone to attend any of those schools. So now I'm confused because we're hearing a lot of other testimony about something quite different, and I don't recall any testimony, certainly not this year, regarding, we haven't heard anything about examples from public schools or what's being taught to these kids. This is all going in various different directions, I guess, and there's not a tie-in here as what's been presented to the committee that I can tell. The presentations have been very, very different. So last one was about private schools. Today I'm hearing more about public schools, but with no actual examples of problematic curriculum. So I'm just wondering what we're exactly trying to address.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, thank you for your question. What we're addressing is simply parents being involved in the school when it comes to gender identity. That's what we're addressing, whether it be public or private. The public schools, we took out the issue and we worked with them to allow the public schools to come up with their own formulation of policies, which they already have in place, which would seek more autonomy for them to use that. That's what we did for the public schools. The private school systems is simply that they have an opt-in instead of an opt-out now.
Private schools would have an opt-in.
That's right. That's right.
Go ahead, Senator.
What line is that opt-in on, Senator Summers? Can you show me?
I got to find it for you. I got it in my notes here.
77.
77. Okay, thank you.
70-something.
Oh, you mean the parents can opt in?
That's correct.
Not the school.
The parents can opt. That's
And
right.
this is for private schools.
That's correct.
But Senator, don't you think people who are paying $30K a year or some amount of their own personal money, if they disapprove of the way a private school is handling these things, they are certainly empowered to take their child elsewhere? No one's making them go to that school. I have a little bit of an objection with that, I gotta say. They chose that school. They don't like it, they can leave.
Senator, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Senator,
Public schools are
I
obviously a
understand where you're
different
coming
category.
from, but we work with these groups to get this bill perfected on the substitute. I don't know what you're reading from. We're working off the substitute now, 491526S on the substitute. Honestly, to be as candid as I can possibly be with you, some of these parents that send these kids to these schools are trapped when they send their kids to school because these kids want to stay at these schools. They don't want to take these kids out, and these kids enjoy being at school there, but they're faced with the issues of this gender ideology. And all I'm simply doing is this bill, the transparency this bill is simply saying, you know, if you're going to talk gender identity to these children under 16 years old, that's where it's at now, notify the parent or guardian. If the parent or guardian chooses not to be part of the situation and opt out, do what you got to do. And if you're worried about that kid, if that kid's in trouble or anything, and they're worried about sending that kid home, that kid could get in trouble in any way, form, or fashion. They have the right to send that kid to a counselor or to a professional or anything, and that person can talk to that child.
Does this
Period.
still contain information about if the child wants to like change their name or at school or anything like that? I see that you've got the social
What their name
transit-
was, that the teachers and the people, only a parent could do that, Senator, not the school nor the, what they come to this world with is their identity. Mm-hmm. That's where it's at.
Do you have anything, last question, do you have anything in here about a student who may rightly or wrongly feel that home is not a safe place? Because as a general matter, I agree with you. However, I
Exactly.
do think, so
Exactly,
what do
that's
you
what I
have?
was talking about. If there's, I think it's section 3D or somewhere in here, if, 3D on line 113, it said when school personnel should refer a student or gender identity or gender transition questions to be designated to the school administrator or school's counselor if they're afraid to go home and talk to their parents.
Is that, I'm sorry, Senator, is that for public and private?
Yes,
or-
ma'am. It'd cover both.
Senator Dolzall?
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman, for bringing this bill. I do want to clarify a couple of things. As I read this bill, I actually think I read it differently than what you just stated as it relates to the last question that Senator Parent asked. But lines 74 through 99 pertain to private schools only. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then lines 100 through lines 120 pertain to public school only.
That's right.
Is that correct? So that would, just to clarify the last question that Senator Parent asked, the safe space language on lines 113 to 115 is only for public school. Because you're really addressing two separate things here. You're addressing the local parentis as it relates to curriculum in the private schools. And on the public school side, you're really not addressing curriculum. You're more so addressing these policies for, I read two triggers in here. I read the trigger on lines 107 and 108 of what the policies should be when a student approaches school personnel. And then the second trigger on line 112, which is when a conversation is initiated by school personnel. So in other words, what should public schools do when a student initiates conversation on these topics, and what should happen when school personnel initiates conversation on these topics? Is that a safe summation of the topics that you're addressing here?
Yes, and I want to address your concerns to line 133 also. That was a little bit more deeper into the code section regarding that. And I have Tom Rollins here with me also, who was the attorney that helped me write these code sections. Tom?
Senator, you're right. So the bottom line is private schools, we're empowering parents to, if they do not want their child to receive this kind of instruction under age 16, then they need to be told about it, and they need to give their permission within a certain deadline, certainly. And then on public schools, no, we're not telling the public schools what to do. Decatur City Schools can teach about gender ideology all day. Decatur County Schools can say we're not going to do that. But we do want each school system, each of the 181 school districts in the state, to make a very clear policy, to communicate that policy to not only staff and teachers, but also to parents. And that way, if the parents have a local issue that they're not happy with the policy, whether it is, we've seen debates all over the country, do we tell parents about social transitions? Do we not tell parents about social transitions? They can decide that in the public school systems on a local basis.
Right, so as it relates to parent notification or parent involvement on line 107, or policies regarding parental notification on lines 111, that's for public school only.
Yes,
All that you're addressing with the private schools is to say that if you are addressing these topics, the parents need to opt in.
Right.
As it relates to the public school, this may be a question for the attorney. I do wonder about the word appropriate on 107, and obviously crafting legislation like this is difficult. That's obviously a broad term, and I'm wondering, could that be read that appropriate parental involvement is none at all?
So here's my thing. If the local school system is going to have to balance, when they create a policy, they're going to have to balance their mandated reporter responsibilities under 1975 against the need to inform parents of what is going on with their children. So I think in reality, no. As you notice, we also have the state school board making some guidelines or some suggestions on this. So I think for a school district to determine they're going to not tell parents in any situation would be probably not something
Okay.
we're going to see. But I
The
do
state-
think it's a
I'm
local
gonna
issue.
just cut you off because I'm following you,
Right.
and I know we're short on time. The State Board of Education policy, just model policies, there's no requirement that the locals adopt them. So they're essentially perhaps helpful, but also useless in terms of as an enforcement mechanism. Can you guys walk us through, this is my last question. When a student approaches school personnel, you require that the parent be involved. When school personnel initiates conversation with a student, you require notification. Help me understand the difference between why notification is required in one instance, but involvement is
Well,
required in
again,
the other.
it's not specifically required, Senator. It's a question of what are your policies going to be in this area? So what is your policy when, we want the school board to ask the question, okay, if we have a child who approaches a teacher and says, I feel awkward in my body, and I think I may be transgender, we need a clear policy on how that's addressed. If the school has a proposed curricula, for example, regarding gender ideology, gender identity, what will be the school's process for determining whether that is taught, whether or not parents, have to opt in, opt out? That's all up to the local school district. Again, from public schools, we're talking about local control.
Local.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since we've had a few hearings on this, this is the second one I think I may have heard. Yeah.
Fourth.
Okay, but the second one that I sit and intensely listen to. But since other people are here in line who didn't speak, can I just get a show of hands of who's against this bill? Oh, my God. Okay.
So we're not taking any testimony?
I was just, that was my question. How many people are against it? So I was just wondering, thank you very much for answering me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, but it's a different bill.
It's a different bill. I read it backwards and forwards.
It's a different bill.
You worked on it.
No, it's the same animal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question, and it's a follow-up, I think, to Senator Dolezal. So correct me if I'm wrong. We are dealing with 3 different types of schools in this bill. For private schools, our requirement is very different than for public schools. We have also, I believe, in lines 130 through 132, exempted out religious institutions, which aren't actually very well defined in here, but they are exempted out. So when you look at where the exemptions lie, it seems that public schools should, and the board should, in fact, come up with policies. I think that's fair. And every parent should know what those policies are. I think religious institutions are exempted out from this requirement, which is interesting, but that's the way it's written. So really, is it not true that this bill is really only dealing with us telling private schools what to do? And it's interesting because and generally in schools, you do opt out. Now you have to specifically opt in. And I'm going to find the line in just a second, but it's lines 83 and 84. Be provided to each parent in such a manner that the document is physically separate and not included among other forms. So we are focused, it seems, exclusively really on the private schools here, and saying that even the rules that the private schools currently have around opting in or opting out, that this particular kind of curriculum category must be separated out from all other permission you would give to the school. And I'm confused by that, because this does still feel to me like a very directed private school bill.
Senator, Senator, I feel I understand where you're going with that. I think the issue is in the religious schools here. Let me make something clear. If a private school takes no funding from the state in any form or fashion, I mean, in other words, there's no scholarship, there's no state money over there. I mean, this does not apply to them. Okay, period. In regards to what the bill is designed to do is, and using the word loco parentis from the lawyers, I mean, basically anyone in charge of a child. So that's what the bill is, and that's the intent of the bill.
Follow up if I may. I do understand that, but why? But public schools are getting money from the state for sure, and the requirement that we're creating for the public schools is that they just need to have a policy.
Right.
But we're not actually saying the same for the private schools. The private schools can't just have a policy. They actually have a whole different manner in which they have to pursue conversations around gender, sexual identity
Well, they don't come
in their
under
curriculum.
They don't come under the Board of Regents. They don't come under the.
But
the
we are entrusting local school boards to make the decision for their local school district, more than one school, but we're not entrusting the local boards of each private school to make those decisions for that school. They do have boards. Private schools have boards. I've sat on private school boards.
I think the state schools board would be making that broad what you're talking about.
But this says local board of education. It doesn't say the state board shall develop written policies. That's a local school board. So how are we making a distinction between the local school board and then the local board of a private school and not treating those two entities the same?
Okay, we're getting, I see where you're going with it, and kind of getting bogged down on the wordsmithing here, but we're losing the gist of what the whole bill is about. It's protecting the young people and including their parents to talk to them about gender ideology. That's where I'm going with it, and I know what you're going with, whatever. That's not the intent of it, and I guess we can read into it.
But
Yeah.
if it passes, then we're going to have to read it just as it's written. So I'm just trying to make sure that I understand if it is written the way we mean it to be written. And if it is, then we are saying that we don't trust local private school boards in the same way that we can trust local public school boards.
You want to answer that, Tom?
Mr. Chairman, I think that, thank you. I think that the key here is that public schools are already required to publish their curriculum.
Exactly.
There's a curriculum review process for public schools that makes that curriculum before it's adopted available for review by not just parents, but the public in general. So we have robust policies in place and continue to tweak those as we need to as it relates to public school curriculum review. Private schools do not have the same reviews. I think what this bill is doing is recognizing the very sensitive nature of discussing these topics with, as the one speaker mentioned earlier, elementary age children. It's ensuring that parents have the ability, the clear requirement that they opt into that. So I think that to conflate, the bill obviously is, I'm not going to say it's confusing, but it is a covering different topics as it relates to public and private school. But if we want to unpack everything that's required in public school as it relates to curriculum, there'd be 100 pages after this bill, because we have a lot of requirements in the state as it relates to the publication and review of curriculum.
Yeah, and I'll make a comment. I actually carried the Parents' Bill of Rights 2 sessions ago, which requires, all curriculum every semester, every 9 weeks, be published for the first 2 weeks of each semester, and a parent can object to it and opt out of certain things. So we do have robust legislation as in regards to public schools, and that's just one measure. Leader Gooch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to pass substitute to SB 88, LC number 491526S.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. Do pass.
Quick discussion, I'll be fast.
Sure.
I just can't help but point out for everyone who's here that it does seem fundamentally unfair to actually, it's one thing, although I disapprove of it, to allow no testimony. It's another to allow testimony from only one side. And I think that's really a black eye on moving ahead on this when there are this many people here. I also want to note that there's opposition to this across the ideological spectrum, because we have these frontline, very conservative group, flyers opposing it. I just think it probably needs a little bit more discussion.
I
and so
appreciate that.
the
Yeah, we've had
rush is-
4 public hearings that have gone on for hours, and we've vetted this bill very extensively. It's changed quite a bit based on each public hearing, so that's, the bill that we've got in front of us is because of all the public comment that we've heard over the past year. So this bill, in my opinion, has been vetted very thoroughly. We've got a motion and a second. All in favor of do pass, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All opposed? Passes 6-3. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Going to jump around a bit. The next bill we're going to hear is SB 351. Senator Brandon Tarte.
Mr. Chairman, number 11. I'm going to go ahead and jump in. So the bill in front of you that I'm working off of is LC 491760S.
Hold on, Senator. Everyone, as you exit the room, if you could keep your voices low. We've got the next bill being heard. Thank you.
First, I just want to thank everyone that contributed to this bill and gave comments, pros, cons, advice along the way from industry, several school systems, school districts across the state, school organizations, social groups, and I want to thank Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones for his leadership. I know we've talked a lot about this bill over the last several weeks, months, going back to last summer. Just as the father of young kids, both in his household and my household, the impacts that we've seen in social media on our youth. So I'm going to go through this bill very quickly and then just leave it for questions. So this bill basically enacts a number of reforms designed to combat cyberbullying, to develop educational programs regarding safe teenage internet and social media use, and to provide for age verification, parental consent, data privacy for teenage users of social media platforms. Just to touch the highlights, you'll see in Part 2, Section 2, this section requires the Department of Education to develop and publish on its website one or more model programs for students in grades 6 through 12, which include social, emotional, physical effects, social media on users, the effects of social media on mental health users, distribution of disinformation, misinformation on social media, permanency and risks of sharing materials online, how to maintain personal security, identify cyberbullying, predatory behavior, human trafficking, which, to save a conversation for another day, is becoming more and more prevalent in our school districts. I've seen it in my own, and thankful for local law enforcement and prosecutors and their work that they're doing. And also suspicious behavior encountered on the internet and social media related to appropriate persons and authorities. Part 2, Section 2.3.
basically talks about how each local board of education will prohibit and prevent students from accessing social media platforms. The policies will be subject to the review of the state board, like many already are, which may include corrective action, which also includes potentially withholding of funding if a local school board fails to comply with this requirement. Part 2, Section 2.4, basically updates and modernizes the Georgia bullying and cyberbullying statutes, which, from my understanding, working with Lieutenant Governor's office and legal team, probably hasn't been updated in nearly 10 years. So just imagine cyberbullying statutes from 10 years ago that have no relevance to today's, iPhones or apps or anything being developed today. Part 3, Section 3.1, requires social media platforms to make commercially reasonable efforts to verify age of account holders and treat as a minor any individual on the platform that verifies under age 16. Platforms must prohibit anyone under the age of 16 from opening a social media account unless the platform obtains express consent from the minor's parent or guardian. The section also requires social media platforms to make available upon request the minor's parent or guardian a listed description of the features offered by the social media company. And then towards the end, the section vests the Attorney General with exclusive authority to enforce the provisions of this bill and the effective date of July 1, 2025. And I do just want to publicly thank Brad Vaughn and the Lieutenant Governor's office for all his hours and days and weeks of working on this over the last several months. This has been a very complex bill, very technical. And I know I would not be here and the Lieutenant Governor would not be here without you, Brad. So I just want to say thank you to you and the entire team, and then those in the public who have given comments. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've got two folks signed up to speak. First is Mike Griffin, and then on deck is Taylor Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Mike Griffin. I'm the Public Affairs Representative of the Georgia Baptist Mission Board. We do support Senate Bill 351. In my being down here, this is my 17th year in working in public affairs work. One of my other areas I work at with Georgia Baptist Mission Board, which again represents about 1.3 plus million Georgians, I work on child protection policy. And I'm very concerned about the sexualization of our children in our culture today. And I believe this bill helps address some of that to make sure that our parents are doing a better job of supervising our children. I taught about 6 workshops last year on dealing with child sex abuse. And for the first time, Greg Love with Ministry Safe gave me the data that child sex abuse now, for the first time, 52% of it is peer-to-peer abuse now. So we're seeing an increase in children abusing other children, and part of that, I believe, is the exposure of children to pornography and obscene material and literature today. We've already seen data that, from 9 to 10 years of age, children are being exposed to pornography. And we're also seeing that many times that's unintentional even. So it's coming from other directions, hitting them, and they need to be protected as much as possible. So we would encourage the committee's favorable support of this legislation, and we thank the senator.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Taylor Hawkins with Frontline Policy Council. Our organization represents many thousands of Georgians across this state who have family and Christian values and who support the family values our state maintains. And I just want to say one of the most important parts of what we do down here is advocate for children. And we want to thank Senator Anna Vitarte and Lieutenant Governor's office as well for the amazing work that they've done on this bill. Really believe that it is in a strong place to be a piece of game-changing legislation that will allow Georgia to lead the way across the nation in what protecting kids looks like online. I put a a flyer that was distributed which highlights just a few of the incredible negative impacts of social media, including the dangers of addiction, depression, the body image disorders, the cyberbullying that takes place online, and the exposure to predators. We'd like to echo what Georgia Baptist just said as well, but just wanted to ensure that everyone is made aware of the fact that the strongest attacks against the God-given identity of children today really do come through the portal of technology and through the portal of social media. And it's a danger that is everyone is increasingly aware of that. The statistics on that are undeniable. They're across the board. They're easy to locate online. Again, we provided some of those. I have a mountain of data that I could have provided in addition. But so we just want to thank the Senator for his strong work on this bill and urge the committee to vote to pass this piece of legislation to safeguard Georgia's children from the dangerous effects of unsupervised access to social media.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the committee? Seeing none, we've got a motion. We've got a motion to pass. Do we have a second? Second. A second. All in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to SB 440.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you'll indulge me, I got Mark Whitlock, who's the CEO of my college and career academy back in Noonan, the CEC, and he will be here for technical questions. But this is a bill dealing with dual enrollment, which is certainly no stranger to this legislature, no stranger to this committee. If you remember back last year, we passed out SB 86 along with SR 175. SB 86 was simply removing a 30-hour requirement of dual enrollment before kids could tap into the CTAE funding. And we followed that up with a study committee where we traveled the state. In fact, we began down in Senator Freddie Powell Sims district down in Albany, really looking at their college and career academy and the program they were doing around nursing. We followed that up with a meeting in my district, my hometown of Noonan, where we went to the CEC and we witnessed what they're doing around a similar program, but they're doing it more geared towards manufacturing. Now, the whole point of the study committee was to really make sure that what we were doing around dual enrollment was going to be sustainable. And to be honest, that the study committee evolved a little bit, and we found some other issues that were out there within dual enrollment. And the recommendations we made coming out of SR 175 was, number one, it needed to be simple. You know, we wanted to simplify dual enrollment. We wanted counselors to understand it. We wanted parents to understand it, and we wanted teachers to understand it. And so one of the things that we learned was that there was multiple lists out there around high demand career fields. And there was multiple lists put out by multiple multiple agencies. So one of the recommendations was that we come up with one list. We also wanted to clarify that high school academics needed to be determined in statute for this program, and because they were kind of scattered throughout statute, and some of it was in code, some of it was rules and regs coming out of the Board of Education, but not in statute, and that added to just a little bit of the confusion. And probably one of the biggest matters that was clouding really our vision of what dual enrollment is and what it can be is funding. And we were pulling funding from just all over our state budget. And so, again, this bill is going to help simplify all those things I just discussed. And then also coming out of SR 175, looking at the sustainability, we did feel like the list, these lists that were out there, we felt like they could grow exponentially, and with no real agency, no one central location of who determined what was going on there. And so that was one of the recommendations. And so the governor's office has actually picked up some of our recommendations from that study committee. They are going to take over and get it down to one list instead of there being multiples, and that's going to be housed in one area. And so some of this bill addresses that. So I'll quickly, that gives you a little bit of a background. Actually, probably gave you a lot of a background, but I'll go through the bill real quick. So if you look on line 20, we're in section 1 here. Line 20, so there, the state board has a rule that accelerated career diploma program. That is in rule. It is not in statute. So we're putting that in statute. Fast forward. Lines 26 through 45, we're clarifying that high school academic courses, and this allows for academic social studies, a flexibility in math to better align with pathway programs. So again, it gives clarity and flexibility. And like in manufacturing and in these nursing programs, math is such a crucial thing that they need to be learning, and so we're allowing math in lieu of social studies, and it's going to help those two pathways, and you see that in lines 37 through 42. Fast forward, let me get into section 2, starting up there at lines 114. This is the current law. It allows 2 maths. We're specifying here that algebra does have to be one of those. And that's, again, that algebra is crucial for the program, but most importantly, it's required by federal law. So we're kind of cleaning that up there. Section 3 really gets into, it's really just cleanup language. It's a lot of outdated language in there. And so while we were in that code section, Ledge Council wanted to go ahead and kind of clean up that. So that's most of section 3. But if you get into lines 149, you see that strike there, and we're doing an addition. With that old language, it got a little conflicting with our new language, and so we're referring it back to that new code section that we just added. And then if you get into lines 175 through 184 there, we're basically saying that dual enrollment funding can be used for this ACE grant program. Again, ACE is your Accelerated Career Diploma program. And then section 4 is we're simply extending the sunset that we did. We had a 3-year sunset on SB 186. And in order to get in this program now, I mean, you need 3 years. And so if someone were to start that now, it would be 2 years. It is my hope that we can one day remove the sunset, and we can make this ACE permanent. And the governor's office is actually looking at the feasibility of that, and we actually hope to have an answer on that here in the next few days. So that's really kind of the gist of what we're doing, and be happy to take questions. And before I do want to add, Senator Parent was very helpful on not just the study committee, but Senate Bill 86 as well, and helped us get to this point. And so she is my number one signer on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate working with you.
It's an honor.
Chairman Brass, I'd just like to note for the record, it's really awkward for all of us seeing you on that side of the podium, so if you could please move back over to this side as soon as possible, we'd appreciate that very much.
I am having an issue.
Can you see me over the podium? That's the real question. I wore my boots today, so you could. So.
I can see you quite well, coming from another vertically challenged person.
Thank you.
Any further comments, questions for the author?
You're vertically challenged.
I am vertically.
Margaret, I probably missed a few things. You want anything pertinent, if the chairman will allow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You covered it well. We appreciate it. Appreciate your consideration. We're excited about this. Accelerated careers making a difference in the lives of students. We've been doing this at Central Educational Center the last 8 years. Some tremendous results. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Chair will entertain a motion. If I was a betting man, I believe it's going to be unanimous.
We shall see.
All in favor, raise your hand. Passes unanimously. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. On the rules.
You might have trouble in that committee. Moving on to SB 464. That is a bill that I'm carrying. What this has to do with is since 2021, the Department of Education has been awarding GEAR funds, Governor's Education Emergency Relief Money, to states for the purpose of providing educational agencies and institutions of higher learning with emergency assistance from COVID-19. And through these funds, the DOE, I can't talk, has been funding teacher school supplies, so supplies for the classroom through a stipend. It's been $200 per year. Currently, from what research that I've been given, the average teacher is spending anywhere from $300 to $600 per year from their pocket, from their own, out of their own money. And then there's been stories of teachers, depending on what subject matter they're teaching, having to spend upwards of $1,000 that funds that are coming directly out of their pocket. And would like to say, this bill, is not mandating any money or dedicating any money currently. That's something I'll have to have a strong discussion with our great appropriations chairman. This basically will just codify this in Georgia law. So when we do have the funds, the funds would not be set. It could be, whatever's available that year. Some years we may not fund it at all. Some years we could fund it, fully, or we could set it at that $200 per year. So it leaves it open, but it just codifies that in law so that we have that option to help teachers out when we can. Be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
One quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I remember when we launched the website, or not we, but maybe it was DOE or it was using some funds, and there was one vendor, but my understanding is now that's been opened up to other vendor applications, and is that what you would contemplate with this as well?
Yes, absolutely.
And it looks like you're relying on rules and regs written by DOE to figure out who would meet the criteria to become a approved e-commerce vendor?
You're correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it's not in the legislation itself. Okay. All right, thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Chair to entertain a motion. We got a motion due pass. Do we have a second? We got a second. All in favor, raise your hand. Passes unanimously. to the agenda. It's SB 147. We did pass it out of committee, but it was referred today back to committee. So we're going to hear from Senator Still. There's been several changes to that bill.
Mr. Chairman. Hey, committee. Hello again. It's our third time hearing SB 147, and this is the shortest, cleanest version we have ever had. In large part due to conversations with most of you on this committee, particularly input from Senators Parent, Sims, and Halpern. The biggest change that we did is we stripped out the former Section 2 of the bill, which would have taken equalization dollars potentially out of the home district to help fund the virtual transfer. So as you recall, this is designed for students that need to do a full-time virtual transfer out of their home district in order to have access to courses that are not offered locally. The best example I can give is the best GPA a kid can get if they don't have access to honors and AP courses is a 4.0 GPA. The incoming freshman class at UGA is a 4.125, and at Georgia Tech it's above a 4.4. Because there's an automatic acceptance for valedictorians and salutatorians, any kid below a number 2 ranking in their class has no opportunity to attend class in our state's 2 largest university systems. This bill was designed as a vehicle to allow kids in underserved areas where those classes are not available to be able to do a full-time virtual transfer and get access to those classes and have the opportunities that they would not have if they stayed in their home district. This is not a voucher bill. This is only a public school system to public school system transfer. It will only move the QBE dollars. And the reason that it only moves the QBE dollars is because if that kid hopped one county over, the QBE follows. If they transfer 5 hours away from one end of the state to the other, only the QBE follows. It leaves all of the local money behind, it leaves the federal money behind, it leaves the equalization money behind. So we felt that this was a critical change to get bipartisan support of this bill, and I did it with the effort that anyone who struggled with the idea of taking money out of the poorer districts would know that the equalization dollars stayed there. So we made all these provisions, we made the changes, we have gone through over a year of edits to hopefully perfect this bill. And I presented it to you today for consideration to see if there are any further questions that we can hopefully get everyone on board and ensure that we can have a vehicle to allow children a full-time virtual transfer, only moving QBE and nothing else. So I thought this might be the opportunity to have it open for any other comments or questions from the committee.
And I'll just state to you, Senator, thank you for continuing to perfect this bill. We got any comments or questions from the committee?
Thank you, Senator Still, and appreciate the opportunity to talk about this offline. So I'm still, and I missed, unfortunately, the hearing earlier this session, so I apologize for that in advance. But we had talked about, and you were just mentioning the virtual component, but I don't, can you explain, looking at the language, I don't see where that's the focus of the bill.
It's not the focus of the bill. The language was changed per recommendation of Legislative Council because when you have neighboring school districts, for the most part, and this is according to GALE, our Georgia Association of Education Leaders, most school districts have neighboring county agreements on transfers. This allows for someone to be able to move multiple districts away. There is no physical method for someone to hop 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 counties away except by virtual. And so that was removed per recommendation of Ledge Council just because of the simple physical nature of it.
Okay, yeah, you did mention that when we spoke. But I guess I can get with Gail about this offline. I'm not aware that I don't know that any of my systems have agreements unless it's intergovernmental about like kind of a specific population.
It would be bordering schools, so from like say one end of DeKalb to the other, from one end of Fulton to the other. But if you had like bordering schools, right on the edge between the two counties, oftentimes they'll have agreements on that.
Yeah, I don't think that's common in.
It's not
my area,
common, but it does
okay.
occur.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Oh, I do have one more. Sorry.
No, you could go ahead.
I'm very loquacious today. So remind me who are the folks kind of supporting and wanting to see this legislation move forward?
There's really no organization in particular. This isn't like a frontline issue or a Faith and Freedom issue or a Georgia Chamber issue. None of the the major organizations. This is not a charter school bill or anything related to that. This is really on the demand of parents that want to be able to get their kids in rural areas access to classes they don't have access to. What prompted it, really being blunt, is we have kids in failing school districts. And as we've learned from hearings recently with the superintendent, and we hear about the thousands and thousands of Georgia kids that are in failing school districts that have no opportunity to go anywhere else. They are trapped in those failing school districts. And if you have a high-performing kid who does not have access to get the classes they need, then what opportunity does that kid have? That's what drove this. This is the hundreds and hundreds of parents across our state that are frustrated at a school system that can't get their kid the courses they need. GAVS, Georgia Virtual, falls short in a lot of the more advanced programs that we have in need. So this fills a gap.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Wow, the committee's gotten quiet.
Took the wind out of the sails. Senator Brass, this is all you're doing. You overwhelmed us with such technical information. I think we... Mr. Chairman, I'd recommend that we, since I've had the opportunity to go through this, sounds like Senator Parent may have another question up her sleeve, so I'm going to...
Making faces.
Would y'all like to work offline on this?
I think we work offline until the next committee hearing. I just want to make sure everybody knew where we were at on everything, and then we hold
Yeah,
till
with the
then.
changes, yeah, I'd be agreeable to that. And,
Good?
Let y'all get together offline.
Great.
And
Thank you.
We'll hear you next week. Yeah. I could see you were reading pretty heavily over there. What number you got, 2?
2, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'm reading on the analysis here. It says total amount of state and local revenue per full-time or per FTE student of such local school system must not be decreased to less than $10,000. I don't see that in the bill.
Right, that was what it's saying is the former Section 2 of the bill had that as a floor on it because of the variable rate of equalization and how that fluctuated from county to county. So when we removed Section 2, it removed that floor on it.
Okay. All right.
It says that those are removed. That part's removed. So that.
I got you. I understand. Okay, I got you. Yeah, it does.
This is updated, it's just saying that.
It was removed from the previous version.
Like, yeah, remove section 2.
I see. I got it.
We might add one more. I'm just kidding.
So Senator Brass, to that scenario, what we had before is if equalization, let's say, was $1,000 plus the QBE, it may have brought that county below 10,000, so we set a floor limit on that to make sure we didn't dip below it. Because we took the equalization part out and we're not touching that on the transfer, we're leaving 100% of the equalization behind in the home district, that the receiving district could only be eligible to receive up to the maximum amount of the QBE, which they would get anyway. So that's not like an extra for them.
Okay.
That's all it would be.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. So we won't take a vote on this. Gonna let the two senators work offline, and we'll bring it back up next week. Thank you all for being here this afternoon. We are adjourned.